Hi, everybody. Hi, I'm Mark Owens. I'm the design director here at the Walker Art Center. Really new thing to say for me, but I want to welcome you to the 2020 Insights Design Lecture Series. This is the moment at the top of every public program when we pause and we acknowledge that the Walker and the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden are located on the contemporary, traditional, and ancestral homelands of the Dakota people. Once an expanse of marshland, you would imagine this as an expanse of marshland and meadow. This site holds meaning for Dakota, Ojibwe, and indigenous people who still live in the community today. So we pause to acknowledge that. You know, we take a moment to acknowledge the history of colonial violence, discrimination, and displacement that allowed for the founding of the Walker, and to honor Native people and their relatives, past, present, and future. You know, as a newcomer to the Twin Cities, living here, you find the words of Native people in your mouth every day. You know, Minnesota, Minnehaha Park, neighborhoods, you know, Hiawatha, you have these names. And for me, it's a powerful reminder that indigenous knowledge, you know, is this life force that surrounds us every day. But it's also, you know, a reminder that the legacy of settler colonialism is a debt that can never be repaid. So, you know, this is that moment when we pause to acknowledge that. Before I introduce Jonathan, I want to first thank AIGA Minnesota and invite Emily McLaughlin to the stage to say a few words words of welcome from AIGA Minnesota, and then we'll take a quick pause and I'll introduce Jonathan. Come on up.
Hello and good evening. Welcome, and perhaps for some of you, welcome back to Insights 2023 Design Lecture Series. I'm Emily, Director of Communications for AIGA Minnesota, and on behalf of our chapter, I'd like to just thank Asli, Mark, Jake, the amazing team at the Walker that's helped put this series all together. For nearly 4 decades now, the Walker and AIGA Minnesota has worked together to bring you the Insights series, bringing adventurous design thinkers and makers right here to the Twin Cities. AIGA Minnesota is also thrilled to just announce that we'll be hosting our annual portfolio one-on-one this year at the end of April, and we're seeking professional designers to review student portfolios, both virtually and in person. Student scholarships are also available, and the deadline to apply is Friday, March 24th. Just getting the word out there. If you'd like to get involved within your local design community, it's a great way. And you can visit our website to learn more. And now I'd like to welcome back to the podium Mark to introduce Jonathan.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks again. I also, of course, want to thank our other long-running partner in this endeavor, Shapco, who provides the printing for our amazing Insights Design Lecture Series posters every year. And if you don't have one, you should pick one up. I also want to thank Asli Alte, our head of content and communications here at the Walker, who sort of really rethought this series with all of us, and it's sort of a new chapter for Insights. Our whole team in the Walker Design Studio, Kate Arley, Ian Babineau, Andrew Bogard, Cam Herndon, Ryan Huddleston, Pamela Johnson, and Jake Usna. Jake, we couldn't do it without you. And everyone really pitched it in this year. It was a real moment where we knew we were coming back in person, and we really pulled together as a studio. Ryan and the whole event production team do a great job. And of course, Mary is here doing our ESL interpretation, and we want to thank her as well. I have to encourage you, of course, to check out the rest of the Insights series. We have still amazing talks coming. Sheriff Ozkan from Nike is going to be here next week, and that's going to be just it promises to be really, really fun. Angela Washko, who is at Carnegie Mellon, is going to bring us into kind of the world of feminist media critique and gaming. That's on March 28th. And then we're going to round out the series with Extreme Noise Records, with a sort of intergenerational engagement with collective identity at this long-running punk collective in Minneapolis. So that's going to be an incredible sort of way to sort of put a button on this series. And we're just so excited to have this lineup. Insights has always been a beloved in-house project for the Walker Design Studio, and this year we're marking our return to in-person lectures by being a bit of reflexive. All the typefaces you've been looking at here on the screen are drawn from an archive of exhibition identity from the Walker that go back to the 1970s. And, this notion of identity, of exhibition, these are the places where the public, art, and the Walker so often meet. And so we thought this was a good way to sort of foreground this larger question of identity that we're engaging with this series. It's a way of both acknowledging this rich history of design that we have at the Walker, stretching back to its founding moments, but also as a way of kind of marking a change. And I hope if those of you who were here last week, and of course this week, I hope you're going to see that we're going to try to be doing things a little bit differently going forward with this series. And it's a very exciting opportunity for all of us. And so in the spirit of doing things differently, I'm just incredibly pleased to welcome Jonathan Jackson, founding partner of the New York design studio WeShouldDoItAll, to the Walker. One of the many benefits of being the design director at the Walker is you get to sort of invite people you like to the campus. And I stand before you as very much a fan of Jonathan and the studio's work as much as a peer or a colleague. So it's just incredibly thrilling for me to be able to have him here. I've followed the studio's work for years, and there's a nice connection to the Walker through Adrian Minar, who worked at WeShouldDoItAll, did the typeface design for, some of you may remember, for Question the Wall itself, which is actually the first project I worked on as an outside partner with the Walker. So it's this really nice connection with the studio. Trained as an architect, Jonathan founded WeShouldDoItAll in 2004, and the practice combines the full range of design communications: print, identity, exhibition graphics, wayfinding, retail spaces, and even architectural spaces. Some of the studio's client projects have included all of the environmental branding and wayfinding for the Nike headquarters in New York, which is this incredible space, custom retail environments for giant clients like Samsung and Spotify, and also serving as the creative lead on the 25,000 square foot community galleries for the National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC. Jonathan individually has also served as a visiting critic at Columbia, Pratt, RISD, and spent actually 2 years on the board of AIGA in New York as well. Jonathan's going to spend some time talking about specific projects, but for me, what's also incredibly inspiring about the studio is the way they've managed to combine world-class design work with a kind of self-reflexive, even radical engagement with the politics of studio practice. And in this sense, the studio name, WeShouldDoItAll, speaks not only to a great amount of ambition, we should do it all, this ambitious approach to studio practice, but also within it is this almost implied kind of challenge to the field in a way. I mean, that's kind of how I think of it. The studio operates with a very little hierarchy, and their Instagram feed has been used to highlight the work of women and designers of color, but also to speak very directly to, things like white supremacy within the field of design. So I'm just really, excited by this ability to sort of challenge us in that way, but also to sort of speak to the ambitions of the field. Above all, though, for me, I think it could be argued that one of the great contributions that Jonathan and the studio have made is to our thinking about space making. And that's both in the incredible environments they've created for commercial and cultural clients, but also in the spaces that we make, or the spaces we don't make sometimes, for one another in the field of design at large, both in the studio and in the meeting room with clients and stakeholders. I want to put that in your mind. So with that, please welcome Jonathan Jackson to the stage.
Well, I'm just going to survey the field, take it in. I'm at the Walker. This is a huge thing for me as a designer growing up and going to the Walker website and just being inspired by this institution. So, Mark, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me to the Walker Art Center. Thank you for having me. This is an amazing treat. I'm going to hit the play button. Perfect. Here we are. I'm going to dive right in because I have a lot of slides to get through. This is the team. We are a studio of we're dwindling down of, in this picture, 8 people, 9 people. We have MP on the top left. MP is from Richmond, Virginia, works from the studio remotely, graphic designer. We have Janet, New York-based, senior graphic designer. Courtney, our project manager. My wife, who is still partner, but no longer creative director, now just focusing on financial stuff, but proud to say that she is now a certified postpartum doula and is got her first client, so everyone's pretty geeked about that. Damar Jones is down in Georgia, architect. G-Man, Queens, senior graphic designer. Geraldine, we call her Jerry, another architectural designer. And then Aisata, who just left us as a strategist and now is the director of marketing at the Studio Museum of Harlem, so we're super proud of her too. But I just want to put these faces here to say that are up because the work that's being shown is done by multiple voices, it's multiple authors. Each one of them could have come and represented the studio. It just happens to be me. As Mark said, we don't put too much emphasis on hierarchy, and we love that. So I'm going to keep going. Want to talk about some works that we've done of late. Not going to dwell on it too much, but the National Academy of Design in New York. It was founded in 1825 and is a leading honorary society for visual arts and architects in the United States. Basically built by designers and architects for designers and architects, and artists, I should say, too. And we rebranded them in 2022 with a new logo and website. The Fabrics Art Festival post-discussion public bench. Fall River, Massachusetts, it's in its 4th, the Arts Festival is in its 4th year now. And in the 2nd year, we designed this bench and basically understanding that Fall River has a heavy influence of Portuguese people, and which is amazing and beautiful. And when there were some tropical storms in Puerto Rico, a lot of Puerto Ricans migrated to Fall River, to which a lot of Portuguese people took issue with that. And the public bench was designed to build public discussion. So on the uprights of the public bench, there's a QR code that asks a series of questions around nationality, heritage, and rituals that you hold deep to your heart, and a reminder of where you come from, and a reminder that we all come from somewhere else. So yeah, it was just an apparatus to start public discussion around that. I'm not going to dwell too much on this, but we're currently working on the Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument Visitor Contact Station. We have members in the audience that are also working on it too, which is really cool. We are developing wayfinding and signage for the project and exhibition design. The building is designed by Todd Saunders Architects out of Norway. We have been impacted greatly by the Wabanaki Confederation, which is built of the Micmac Nation, the Halton Band of Maliseet Indians, Penobscot Nation, and the Passamaquoddy tribe. We collaborate with them at least 2 times a week in developing the exhibition design, which really will tell the stories of them, their heritage, and their connection to the land. It opens in August this year, so super exciting. Another project we're working on is for Riri's group, Savage by Fenty, doing their first brick and mortar store in New York and Brooklyn. That's an existing building to which we're trying to redesign. 6,000 square feet. The building it looks pristine in here, this shot, but it's wearing down quite a bit and halted a lot of design process, asbestos, lead, the whole 9. So, but none of that I'm going to talk about for tonight. I like to get started. I like this quote. It gets my mouth going too. So, a human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, die gallantly. Specialization is for insects. It was written by Robert Heinlein in the book Time Enough for Love in 1973. I read it in college and kind of just knew the name of the studio should be We Should Do It All after that. The quote for us really speaks to the multifaceted approach that we want to take with design, different challenges within it. And I won't tell you what I can't do on this list, but trying to get there. So tonight's talk, the less you know, the better. It's a heavy talk, so bear with me tonight. The following is a series of run-on sentences that capture my Black experience and personal feelings as I try to wrap my head around where we are, where I am. I find a strange piece to look back at where we've been. This talk widely looks at racism as an American pastime through the lens of space making, intrusion of space, and safe space, and weaves in how we should do it all as finding small acts of resistance within this framework. Scattered throughout this presentation, you'll see images of Black joy. What is Black joy? Community organizer and queer activist Miracle Jones says, it's the indescribable joy that comes from being able to live and thrive despite all obstacles and barriers living in anti-Blackness. All right, dwelling in the proper sense is now impossible. The traditional residences we grew up in have grown intolerable. Each trait of comfort in them is paid for with a betrayal of knowledge. Theodore Adorno, and it sets up this talk. Beautiful sweatshirt designed by Elijah Justice. Look it up online. I got one. It's nice. The burden of knowledge can be a lonely place. I've come to understand that one's skin color politicizes them, politicizes me at birth. I'm trying to make sure that fear is their condition and not mine. I know that the idea of George Floyd's death opened the eyes and ears of white America, or the globe at large, was in itself a sickening act to me. Because it says, despite being told and shown the constructed conditions of the Black struggle through every form of communication possible, verbal, nonverbal, written, listening, and visual, it was never enough to stop America's prosperity. America benefited from this pain, and only when COVID-19 halted our well-being did you have have to take the time to open your schedule and for a slow Black death. And yes, of course, I was angry about the loss of another Black human being. But as a Black person myself, one cannot escape the eternal rage and hurt emotions that can consume you. Juxtapose that with an internal numbing that happens because sadly this is our normal. The destruction of the Black body is an American pastime. The year of 2020 changed something in me that I cannot put a finger on, but I'm in constant state of seeking guarded spaces of refuge and rebellion at the same time. So into space making. Space making separates, it shatters, it moves, puts one in a box, puts one above others. It is erasure. One of the first symbols of a new space for the African, to which became the African American. This is the Tree of Architecture by Bannister Fletcher. The Tree of Architecture is a hierarchical representation of power structure in the colonial era, where the Euro-American architecture find their way into the top, whereas the style of the colonies and the conquered lands are lost midway or don't find any mention at all. And I'll just zoom in so you can see the German, French, English, Italian at top, and going further down, the Chinese and Japanese, the Egyptians, the Peruvians. To me, this diagram is a history to which he wanted it to be, but not as it is. The slave house to another slave house. This is architect Adolf Loos' house designed for Josephine Baker, whom he saw as a primitive savage and wanted to confine her in his cage. This wasn't a real commission. This is his own self-project. Later to come find out he was extremely attracted to her and probably hated himself for it. This is an artwork depicted of that story by Iranian artist Kamruz Aram. Gordon Parks. The Pruitt-AIGA projects, a symbol of failure of urban renewal. It only lasted for 20 years before it was torn down in St. Louis, Missouri. The idea of the highways as a tool to divide and segregate. The middle animation is the Albina district in Portland, Oregon. I became familiar with this through the work at Nike, and later the Albina district redevelopment team reached out to us about doing a website, and so I gained further knowledge of that. But basically, this was an erasure of a black neighborhood within Portland, and now Portland doesn't really have one anymore. And then you have Atlanta, Georgia Highway, Miami, but basically that idea of creating highways to divide and segregate. The idea of what to do with the Negro, this idea of segregation. This book, An American Dilemma, The Negro Problem in Modern Democracy, written in 1944, or published in 1944, by Swedish economist Gunnar Myrdal, was funded by the Carnegie Corporation. He was chosen as a non-American, as sort of indifferent to being white and black. He wouldn't have any bias, as to say. The volume is nearly 1,500 pages. It was used in the Brown versus Board of Education courts. And the book concluded that the Negro problem is the white man's problem. Mr. Myrdal formed a team of African-American researchers and scholars to conduct interviews, study American life. He chose to exclude the names of those contributors, only affording them a small mention in the back. We call them the hidden figures. An American Dilemma for the 21st Century is a digital platform with, which greatly expands the access of those scholars, and the general public to have these writings. Basically, the writings that Gunnar's team put together, that research. It increases the visibility of the hidden figures and those scholars who worked alongside Myrdal. And in doing so, the website that we created for it was commissioned by the Social Science Research Center, and it put those beautiful minds to the forefront. I'll keep going. A lot to get through. These articles are, thousands and thousands of word essays, deep research on different subject matters. You can see race and the Negro problem, population and migration, politics, and so on. Keep going. Diagram mapping of redlining across the country, and here, Decatur, Illinois. This was a map from 1942. And we're still dealing with redlining now, but we also have to deal with discrimination within property value. What's interesting is not only are their homes in largely black areas valued less, but the homes owned by black people in white neighborhoods are also valued at a less number. It has it's a direct and historical aspect on how black and brown people are valued is prevalent. This is an artwork by Robert Pruitt depicting Ta-Nehisi Coates. It's called Monumental. And to quote the artist, in Monumental, the lone woman's dress recalls American antebellum fashion. Her head cover, a large, colorful property map referencing redlining maps used in the 20th century discriminating housing practices. I've attempted to emulate Coates' spirit of clarity through my approach and reference to ideas of home, property, and architecture. That artwork was seen in the exhibition called Men of Change, Power, Triumph, and Truth that we designed the branding for and exhibition design for. It is essentially 25 African-American men who've changed American history. It goes to 10 different museums over the course of 3 years. It is currently just wrapping up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and heads to South Carolina next, and I believe Alabama after that, and that will be the 10th museum. In developing the identity, we wanted to create something that was really flexible, but also putting the men to the forefront. So I don't have that animation tonight, but the men switch in and out. And thinking about flexibility, we want to also have that with the exhibition design itself. So these are 3 different shows, but you can see the manifestation of the given gallery changes, of course. So we had to create an exhibition that was flexible in that sense. The exhibition covers 6 themes of storytellers, myth breakers, fathering, community, imagining, catalysts, and the 7th one that's not necessarily on an arc is loving, and axonometric. This is the installation at CAM, California African American Museum. So made up of a series of light boxes, and we pushed really hard and worked really well with the curating team. Sites is their traveling exhibition department. And thinking about the exhibition and just recognizing how didactic it was and it needed another level. So we pushed hard to get some more budget money to ask 25 artists to depict these heroes. And that 25 men that list was once at 500. And the curating team worked really hard to get that number down. So as you already saw, Robert Pruitt depicting Ta-Nehisi Coates, Nina Chanel Abney depicting Andrew Young, Devin Shamoyama depicting Kehinde Wiley, Troy Meaching depicting Shaka Senghor, Cezanne depicting Bayard Rustin on the left, and Patrick Earl Hammy depicting Ramir Bearden, Sean Leonardo depicting LeBron James, which I thought was a really interesting take. Strong. I'm going to keep going. Infiltration of space is dark, it's psychological, it's mass psychosis. It's uninviting, it's penetrating, and unapologetic. The Trail of Tears. Teddy Roosevelt was a big fan of Andrew Jackson's move here. A quote saying, "No other conquering and colonizing nation has ever treated the original savage owners of the soil with such generosity as the United States." Public Enemy, Fear of a Black Planet, a great listen. Tulsa, Oklahoma just celebrated its 100-year anniversary last year. The timelessness of false and destructive acts of Amy Cooper and her counterpart, Carolyn Bryant. She was the woman who essentially killed Emmett Till. America drained its pools rather than integrate. The story on the right, in 1964, several white and black protesters jumped into a pool in Monsoon Motor Lodge in St. Augustine, Florida. The white motel owner, James Brock, dumped cleaning acid into the water to get them out. Little Rock. The haunting image of a haunting choice and the power of white as the default. Gordon Parks. This is the work of Alexandra Bell, A Teenager with Promise, it's called. Her exhibition Counter-Narratives perform visual examinations that reveal news media's complicity in perpetuating racial prejudice in America. The George Floyd backlash has concocted another counter-narrative of an obscure academic and legal theory into the boogeyman. The Forum. We were approached by Kimberly Crenshaw and the African American Policy Forum to build a news organization, website, platform, educational resource, and also an activist hub that looks at the political and cultural landscape of America today through the lens of critical race theory. It's called The Forum. It looks like this. The Forum believe that CRT is about the actual encounter with America's whitewashed racial history and is crucial to reviving our democracy. They have committed to combating disinformation against CRT by demonstrating that that CRT is not a threat to democracy and bring CRT from academia and legal sectors to everyone. The site examines through 6 themes, and we were inspired by archival newspapers, and typography tends to be the star on this website, just through the multiple iterations and various sort of voices that it creates. The editor-in-chief on this was Chris Lehman, art directed by Lindsay Ballant, and they hired us to, and AAPF hired us to design the website. Get Out illustrates the fantasization of blackness. It also reinforces the psychological struggle of black people trying to navigate through a larger racial dynamic where white perspective either lionizes or demonizes black people, dictating the perception of the black identity. Us has strong ties to W.E.B. Du Bois's double consciousness. Appropriation of black culture. Appropriation of indigenous culture. Corporate America has failed black America. The summer of white guilt is what I call it. Before I start this, we work with Nike quite a bit, and over the years, countless projects at different scales with them. Their response to the George Floyd incident and many companies that put forth a message failed quite a bit at delivering that message in a clear, succinct way. And for me, I felt like it was a slap in the face what Nike put forth in this video is that. For me, for a company that was built off black people, it just felt like a really weak response. And their counterparts kept it really simple. I just felt like this hit home. I don't know if any corporation really needs to do this, but if you're going to do it, make a better effort. Following that ad being released, I went to Instagram right away and just posted how I felt about it. That's what you see on the 2 columns, the left and middle. And then on the right, our studio and 2 other studios, Fist Projects in Portland, Oregon, and Neighbors in Brooklyn got together and requested that 15 other studios that we know Nike works with all the time put a letter together addressing the situation. Since then, we had ongoing conversation with Nike leadership. We like to think we made some impact, and we have some great soldiers within Nike that are becoming more heads of state there and getting to control the narrative of what gets put out. We continue to work with Nike, but it's definitely less so, maybe by design, maybe not, but I think I'm good with it too. In that summer, we got approached by these 6 companies in a 2-week span, something that will never happen to us again. Uncle Ben's, y'all, like Uncle Ben's. And we said no to just about every one of them except for one, and I'll share that story a little later, but just shows that we were sort of just being played with, and if they recognized that you were Black, it was like, let me have you. And for a studio that's been around since 2004, it was just a tough pill to swallow. And actually do really good work too, so I don't know. This is Hank Willis Thomas's So Glad We Made It, a McDonald's ad and reappropriated. His continued work, yeah, I mean, it's powerful. This is ABA, a Journal of Affairs of Black Artists. I was really gravitated to the opening message of the magazine. Where has the Black artists in America been all this time? They've been in the streets in Watts and Roxbury and in Chicago. They've been in their body in hard times. They've been in their eyes of people who love them and in the eyes of people who hate them. They have been putting it all down on canvas, in stone, out of wood, affairs of the Black artist. Safe space. Safe space is fresh air. It's freeing, unlearning, a cleansing, unique, and necessary. The Underground Railroad. Dangerous, not necessarily safe space, but maybe what it led to could be safer. Green Book guides to our brothers and sisters in the LGBTQ community. Church is safe space for some. The stoop, the barbershops, rooftops, Oak Bluffs, safe space. Oak Bluffs leads me to the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Ralph Applebaum and Associates tapped us to work on this with them, needing more Black faces within their studio. We weren't in their studio, but we were collaborators and made sure that we had credit based on the agreement we had with them. So, but it was great for us because it was a massive project and we were only 3 people at the time. 25,000 square feet of exhibition space for our floor, 86,000 square feet of exhibition space throughout the whole building. We got to work on the second floor galleries. Anyone been? Cool, awesome. It's a lot to take in. We tried to fight for quiet space, but we lost those battles. But our role was developing the sports, military, power of place, and making a way out of no way galleries. And then some fun facts around the museum. It was 100 years in the making, first started by Civil War veterans. In 2005, became official with Lonnie Bunch spearheading the monumental effort. It has temporary galleries in American history. Sorry, that's weird. There was no collection, no staff, and no building from its jump. In 2010, Applebaum Associates jumped in on the project when David Agiai Associates were in early schematic design phase. The huge team of 80 plus design teams and consultants, 90,000 square feet of exhibition space, I mentioned, 12 galleries, 20 plus curators. The history galleries, we had to dig down, making the history galleries 60 feet deep into the earth. There are 6,376 graphics, images, 500 cases. Visitorship is well into the millions every year, sans COVID 2020 year, but and the average stay for visitors is 3 to 5 hours, and it's now a mandatory training for the DC Police Department to visit. We did 1,000 iterations of our floor. It's fun to look at these nightmares and such. But honestly, like the weight of working on this was at times unbearable, just like putting that pressure on yourself to get this right for the ancestors. But what a responsibility. So we landed here as a floor plan. The green marker represents the making a way out of no way gallery. It's the first thing you see when you come off the escalators. We saw that as a metaphor for the whole museum, and sort of made it the connective thread that attaches sports, which is on the right, military, which is on the left and has that kind of awkward wing sticking out, and power of place, which sits in the middle, where you find like the Oak Bluffs display and such. Yeah, so making a way out of no way was, this is sort of the visual, but it really spoke to the unsung heroes within different agencies of education, press, faith, creativity, but just showing massive resiliency through these different stories. From a design nerd point of view, the development of the skin changes and varies in depth depending on what it needed to hold. In some cases, it holds a bed. In some cases, it holds, military gear, uniforms, imagery, objects. Inside of that skin lives the hub and power of place. The hub is an interactive moment connecting Black history, American history. And then on the military wing, that awkward wing that I talked about is the house for the Purple Heart and winners of past Purple Hearts. It looks out at the Washington Monument. The entry to the sports gallery. Inside the sports gallery, it's funny, we designed that ribbon wall like when we first started, just thinking it would be placeholder, and then somehow it made it sway all the way through. I'm gonna keep going. There are Black people in the future. So Safe Space continues with Deem. I don't know if anyone's familiar, but it's a fairly new magazine, journal. Highly recommend. Every issue is amazing. I think they're at their 5th now. BLM protest, excuse me. Goods. Goods doesn't have a project number. That's what's been on the left side the whole time. This was a personal project that I was invited by Scope of Work, which is a New York agency that keeps young talent, retains and gets young talent into the creative fields in New York City. And they partner with the Black National Convention that was created by the Movement for Black Lives to confront the failures of Black America. So right after those 6 companies reached out later in August, my good friend Geneva, who runs Scope of Work, brought me onto this, and it was like therapy. Essentially, talented designers, photographers, writers got together to create an Instagram magazine that really was an expression of Black creatives and finding success in unconventional ways. We created a logo for it. I'm just going to read the statement of what Goods is about. It's a conglomerate of Black diasporic ideologies and histories. It is the opportunity to decolonize our narrative from white corporate gaze by knowing our power, protecting our worth, and collecting what is owed to us. Did t-shirts. So there were 5 issues, each issue highlighting, again, an unconventional, successful Black entrepreneur or creative. Because it was a social magazine that leaned into our community. It built friendship, and it minded our magic. It's still up. You can visit it. We don't add to it anymore, but it was again, a part of the movement for Black Lives, and really appreciate that work. It came at the most needed time for me, so yeah. So we're close to the end here. My struggle and self-argument lies with the spaces we keep looking for acceptance in. It's amazing because it's the same type of spaces that maybe will never fully embrace us. I do wonder if we were to see the design world for what it truly is, how it functions, how it commissions, who's awarded, who's invited to the party, should we be demanding to attend? Maybe it's time to seek something else, create something else for something else elsewhere. And I'll just leave you with this. amazing show by Steve McQueen. But
Just me. Hello? Mom? Hi, Safe. All right, Dad. Where's Mum and Hyacinth?
Hyacinth take him out at the bingo. My mother. Let me tell you what my mother used to say to me. She says, son, if I walk past the cemetery and I see a deep grave, and that's all you can do because you have no learning, she said, I will be upset. But if I pass by there and you digging graves with education, then that is what you choose to do. And I must support that. My mother, boy. You know, I find the world, it just move forward. Always do. Big change. That is a slow turning wheel.
Sometimes I think the earth needs to be scorched. Replanted. So something good will come of it. Something good.
thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having
This is
me.
a big stage for me too. You know, it's incredible to have you here and get to spend time with you. I mean, you know, we're kind of the same design generation in coming up in New York around the same time, and you know, giving us a really powerful, you know, examination of kind of some of the more urgent concerns within the design field. But, you know, I think one of the things that interests me as I get like further my design career, now I'm like leading a studio here, is our responsibility when we enter those roles, and then also the role of things like mentorship in running a studio. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that's been on my mind in this new role here at the Walker. Maybe this might be a nice time to talk a little bit more about, you know, running a studio. You know, what is it like mentoring people? You know, setting them up for the next thing, because I think, that's how change happens, right? I mean, the way you sort of foster the next generation. And I think I've seen, older generations in design haven't always been the most generous, actually, in holding on to power and that kind of thing. So I just maybe we should start talking a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm still coming down this.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to keep it light. Keeping it light.
But as far as studio culture, we should do it all. I mentioned the disbelief in hierarchies. I think it gets really tough to practice it day in, day out, in the sense of the expectation of the client is not looking for that. But we try to be upfront and transparent as possible, that you're not always going to get me or Courtney, the project manager, but the designer that you have is more than capable of running the show. And, we talked about this last night, but the goal for my coworkers, my wife and myself, is when you enter We Should Do It All, we want to give you the tools to, when it's time for you to leave, that you can, if you want to, become an entrepreneur. So our financial files, our proposals, how we write to our clients is all available to the team. And that's been amazing to have a transparent studio, and each designer knows who's making what. And it just, that level of fluidity has been quite nice. And honestly, like, we didn't start that until 2021, I want to say. But it's changed, I think, attitudes, and there's no behind the backness anymore. And it just feels good to have that level of studio culture. We do 4-day work weeks. We try not to work Fridays. Yeah, it's been nice. Yeah. It's been nice.
You also manage a kind of a remote team. I mean, it's a real hybrid work environment in a real way. And
yeah, like, we're kind of probably split down the middle on who wants to get back into a physical space versus who doesn't. And I personally would love to be back in the physical space and exchange ideas rapidly like that. But for now, we're all remote. I'm upstate New York. Most of the team is New York. Again, Richmond, Virginia, in Georgia. So it's all over the place, but it's been fun. I think, you mentioned Adrian, who was our very first employee, that Mark found his work, and just the idea of, passing along what you've learned. We kind of have a big brother, little brother relationship, and anytime that him and Victoire need anything, that's his partner in life and work. They've opened up their own studio, Edition Studio. You should look them up. Yeah, amazing work. Whether it be contracts, whatever, it's all there for our former employees, so, and current. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all sort of thinking about the world of work and work-life balance and hybrid arrangements. And, I found even in my teaching before I took this role that, like, I got my best reviews during the Zoom period, because you could have people come in for 30 minutes that you would never be able to get in a physical space. I think there's some upsides to it. There's a leveling when you're in that frame, and everybody can kind of have there's valuable moments to have in the studio. Can you talk a little bit, this is something we also touched on, but we didn't really get to talk about, so we'll talk about it in a public way, is talk a little bit about process in the studio, because it's like you have this part on the website that's like, we love process, and, I think that's also another kind of behind the scenes thing with running a studio that it's such a rich part of design practice and thinking about process.
Yeah, and our website is brutally outdated. So run to our Instagram, but as far as process is concerned, that page on the website needs to be updated too, but I do enjoy it because it just shows what we were thinking about at the time of these projects, and we show projects that never made the light of day. Just exercises and just fun stuff. And then on our IG, what do you call those circles at the top?
Stories?
Highlights. Thank you.
Yeah.
In our highlights, we show, like, for National Academy of Design, we walk the audience through start to finish that design process, and we show even like emails from the client. just shedding light on the design process and the idea that nothing goes this smooth. Nothing. It really does take a village, and it takes a lot of patience on both sides to get this stuff done. And you'll see a couple of those in our IG highlights, so definitely check that out. But yeah, process has just been, I don't know if it comes from my architecture upbringing, but the rigor and iteration after iteration is something I've always been attracted to. But I also have been really attracted to just like sharing the ugly. There's beauty in that. Like why hide that stuff and only show the pristine? So and as far as like how we work, it's like a little level of competition where a new project might come in and then everyone touches it regardless of your background. It's just like design thinking, like what are modes to how we can start to break down this challenge, whether you're a 3D designer or a 2D designer, and coming to the table with sketches and thoughts lead to iterations of real concrete ideas. And those may not always be manifested by a 3D designer, but that 2D designer on our team can translate that into, so there's just a lot of dialogue between individuals, and these individuals then, like if their design is chosen by the client, they become the leader of that project and is supported by the rest of the team.
I mean, maybe this is a gross generalization, but I think also our kind of peer group in design entered the field in this moment where a kind of multidisciplinarity and like moving across boundaries and trying not to be as siloed. And part of that was an economic pressures on us as designers coming up. But I feel like we inherited this kind of desire to work in that way where it could be, it's like, and also because software changed so quickly. So you're like, well, my Flash skills are no longer relevant, so I need to learn something new. And so you end up sort of working, in 2D and 3D environments and sort of being really nimble in that way. So I think it's also part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe to deviate to a previous question too, is just thinking about our studio culture. I think a lot of creative people in this room, you, me, grew up, worked in a lot of traumatic places. And for We Should Do It All, it's like, how can we totally get away with that, or get away from that, excuse me. And how can we get away from that? And answering that question of like, okay, 4-day work weeks. Okay, everyone has full transparency. I'm not going to name any studios, but sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah would never do this. So I know I'm on the right track, So it's like,
right.
Yeah.
I do want to make some time to open it up to the audience for questions because I know people have questions, but I had one other thing. You asked me, you're like, well, the talk is kind of heavy. I want you to keep the Q&A light. And one thing I want to talk a little bit about Bark. And I know one of your big project for the Nike HQ involved going to North Carolina to a special vendor and choosing by hand enormous sheets of bark as part of our project. And that, first of all, sounded amazing. Yeah. But secondly, just seemed like, I don't know, somehow connected to a lot of the energies of the studio in a weird way. It's like incredibly ambitious. It's also incredibly, it's an ecological sort of statement. There's a politics to that kind of material choice. Yeah. And so maybe you could just talk a little bit about Bark.
Yeah, I wish I could plug this studio in North Carolina, but I'm forgetting their name.
Yeah, I found it on.
They're on our website. Yeah. If you go to the project, they should be on there. But for a particular wall where we wanted to pay homage to Nike's roots in Beaverton, and it being sort of in this natural environment and thinking about the 70s, it just worked. But we found this company in North Carolina that, when trees are cut down, the bark is stripped and the bark is kind of just thrown away. And they decided to use the bark, put it in a kiln, flatten it, and then it becomes like wall surface. And if you're familiar with Parsons in New York, I think Lever Architecture designed something using that bark, and I was like, that this would be something for us to use. So I contacted them. My parents live in North Carolina. We happened to be visiting them anyway, and I was just like, let me just schedule an appointment, and ended up choosing 56 sheets, which was 8 by 12.
Yeah, they're not 4 by 8 sheets.
But really beautiful stuff. you can see that project on our website. And yeah, just speaking to the process of like finding ways to consciously think about what we're doing. We do a lot of pop-up stuff. We do a lot of temporary exhibits, but I don't think we can solve the problem of environmentally conscious design completely. But if there's steps that we can take throughout the design process to make sure that we're doing the right thing, I think we try to take those opportunities as much as we can.
Yeah, I think I'd like to open it up to the audience, and I think someone will take the mics around if people have questions.
Thanks for the talk. It was awesome. I'm curious to know what you mentioned you want to get into product design. What's on the top of your mind in terms of products, or if you can't share, that's cool too.
No, I can share whatever. Yeah, thank you for the compliment. So my wife and I have had a tea set design in our brains for a long time, so we're trying to manifest that out. Table, bench. Trying to think of what some of the team members in the studio have talked about. I think we want to do more rugs. An outdoor, we feel like the living room table, I don't know, I've never found one that I'm like really, that does the job. I would like to take on that challenge. I feel like, I think I'm forgetting the list, but the team has mentioned other things too. But those are some. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing that with us. I'm just curious if you could share more about. I was just like kind of impressed with that open letter to Nike and the other kind of communications you did around that. I'm just wondering if you could talk about how you made that decision, if it was kind of like, I have to do this, or if you were weighing different factors. It just sounds kind of scary to take a stand, or if it felt like, no, this is just what I got to do.
There wasn't a hesitation at all. The two other studios that we're in conversation with, there was no hesitation from their side either. They both had worked internally at Nike and just shared with me their experiences. So I'm like, oh my God. It just felt like we had to do it. There was no doubt about it. And the idea of like grabbing 15 other studios that we know Nike works with on a year-to-year basis was kind of like a little chokehold. And yeah, we like that. I don't know. It's just like you invest all this time, you know what they're built off of. And honestly, I felt like I had nothing to lose. You're Nike, you're going to fire a black-owned studio? I don't know. We were in a winning position, I felt. Yeah. Pretty much it.
Any fallout or any respond at all?
Yeah, I mean, it got circulated. We sent it. Our internal friends at Nike gave us the VPs and the president's emails. So like it reached top level, and I'll say this: we had ongoing conversations with three Nike executives. They were all black. And I'm just going to be truthful. To me, that felt like even a slap in the face then, because I just envisioned their bosses saying, "Hey, we need you to handle this." They denied it and all that stuff, but I will never believe otherwise. Just don't. So how we work with Nike now is very much selective. If the team approaches us and that team has no representation whatsoever of POC, That's a problem. We say no. Subject matter matters to us, but we also, it's a really tough position that we're in the sense that Apple just approached us about some work around Black History Month. And if you remember, that was one of the companies that reached out to us in that 2-week span. The first time they reached out to us, it was around, well, we need you to be MBE certified, WBE certified. If those who don't know, it's minority-owned business or women-owned business certification. Opening phone call with them, and I'm like, wait, you need proof that I'm Black? And I literally said it to him, do you make sure your white studios have to make sure that they're white to get the work? Because I know this is just about checklists. So we turned it down. A totally new group approached us about Black History Month. But even then, it was just like, ugh. So we're in this like weird mix of, do we take on Black work? Because, I don't know, like in the context of Nike, like I like tennis too. Like I don't want to just do Black History Month for Nike, you know? Like it's just a weird position that we find ourselves in, and navigating those things. I feel completely lost, but I have smart people on the team that we have tons of conversation around this. So,
Thank you for the talk. Really impressive and also thought-provoking. I wanted to, it's more maybe a comment rather than a question, but maybe you could expand on what I'll say. I mean, you started with the infiltration of space and how you kind of maybe cunningly maneuvered into doing stuff and then expanded on the safe space. But then you ended up with the kind of thinking about an other space. And the way you reflect on your work, and also during the Q&A, how you kind of mentioned the way the studio works, it got me thinking that that other space is maybe not necessarily outside, but something that's kind of hovering above or within I mean, I'm sticking to your metaphor of the space, but within the space.
yeah, you're absolutely right. And that last wordage that I wrote was with the goal to investigate what that other space is. But I've never gotten to really finish that presentation, to be honest with you. The idea of this other space, and I'll say I feel like those words come from my darker side of like burn it, let's burn this all down. I don't know if I'm there. This is a fluctuation in my brain. This is like, do we work within these systems? I think we're going to have to. Will the systems allow it? I want to say yes, but the way that, I was talking to my friend today, it's like, it seems like nothing but darkness these days. But when I think about that other space, and I would ask like for our young people who are visionaries that can see the faults of where we currently are. You can't come to the table with just complaining. You have to come to the table with a pushing forward, guiding those who don't know, to help them understand. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'm basically saying I'm still in a lost place, and I'm still trying to navigate what that other space feels like. But I do feel like the idea of each one teach one, this idea of guidance for our younger people, our younger creatives, give them all the tools so that they can make this new space easier to comprehend and do. I'm not there yet, though. I'm sorry. I wish we can talk about this more upstairs. Yeah.
Hello? Yes. Hi, thank you. I'm up here. Does it frustrate you that you couldn't reveal to DWR what the rug was about? It's really sticking, it's really bugging me that, I get why you had to do that, but does that bother you that you, because I think there'd be so much power in that, and I'd like to believe there would be a market for that as well, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
I don't know if the market would be bigger than the market I'm trying to reach. I can understand why that bothers you. And I had to come to terms with not revealing it, but the fact that I can get to do it to little audiences like this is like, so, I mean, yeah, I want that secret to live on. But as you, even the idea of a market for it, like, to me, that's a little of a problem. Like, the idea of black pain then being taken under their narrative to then, right now, as a secret, it remains under our narrative, and I like that better. Yeah.
Thank you for your time and work. It was really moving. I was really moved by the first quote about how specialization is for insects. And I feel like both careers and education kind of like coerce you into being specialized. So my question is like, how have you and the talent you surround yourself kind of like achieved not specializing?
Man, this name causes us so much friction, even between my wife and I. She's like, maybe it's time to change the name. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm relaxed now, so it's like, yeah, I don't know, like, to me, the constant challenge day in, day out is for convincing people to trust us that we can do this. No matter what our portfolio looks like, it's still the case. And, you know, the fact that we want to drift more into product design, we're trying to develop a game plan to get more of that work, but how do you get that work if you don't have enough work to show? So we are in a tough place, and I feel like our exploratory nature is basically, we just decided that we're gonna produce a table, we're gonna do these things on our own, build up the portfolio for self-guided work rather than relying on the client or a client, and hopefully someone starts to believe in us after seeing that work. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but the idea of expertise, gaining expertise. I'm a self-taught graphic designer after schooling in architecture, and I believe that our team is, all of us are interested in other things, and that innocence and naivete is kind of cool. Like, yeah. It kind of, in our ways, is kind of like breaking some rules of like, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. And we want to learn from those who've done it better than us, or done it well, what they call like masters and such. But we like to think that we can bring something new to the table if given the opportunity. So now we have to make the opportunity for ourselves. Yeah. Thank you.
No one.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So, like with the covert rug, and you talking about coming from places of darkness, and then, you know, in your mind, is the rug more, like an expression of revolt, or do you find humor in it, like a space for joy in that sort of final laugh, you know, the joke's on? I suppose, like, is there, like, how can you seek joy and seek humor, and how do you, like, ultimately let that be your reward, since, you know, the people who are giving you the reward of perhaps the opportunity, it's, you know, almost slanderous in your perspective of it. So, like, how do you find that within yourself, maybe?
Yeah, I mean,
I
I feel like I'm really good at how do you say this word? Thank you. I feel like I'm really good at that, and I think I find joy not necessarily in the I got you, but it's undeniable that DWR is a huge platform. And we accomplished something. We got something on a major furniture product design site company, and I take joy in that. How it came to us, I don't like, but I feel like I got my get back through the words, through the secret. And I'm just like at peace with that part. If they approach us again, we're open now. Like, not all is forgiven, but I can move on because I got mine. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think we all got to remember to pat ourselves on the back and what is this the young people say? Give you your flowers. You got to do that to yourself, you know. So yeah. Oh yeah, that's Miley Cyrus. I like to think it was younger than that.
Flowers cost a lot less than a Design Within Reach rug, I'm sure.
Hi, I'm up here. I wish. Could you explain a little bit more about why you turned down the Nike job? Was it because you were black and they wanted you to do something for Black History Month, or what was the process of? And did you object to the fact that they wanted to do something for Black History Month, or could you just explain that a little bit more?
So actually, we didn't turn down a Nike project. We turned down an Apple project.
Okay.
We don't know what that project was about.
Okay.
Because we never got that far. The fact that they said you got to become MBE certified to work with us, to me was like, what?
So it wasn't the fact that it was something black related. Necessarily.
No, not at all.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
But maybe I'm just jumbling some words, but later Apple did approach us 2 years later, a different team, about doing something for this past Black History Month, and we did it. It was awkward. It was strange and uncomfortable at times, but we did it. And I think that's a learning lesson that the whole team is kind of still reflecting on. We don't have all the answers. We're trying to figure stuff out, y'all. But yeah, that first approach from Apple was just like, are you kidding me? And there's nothing wrong with being certified in those two realms, but I just had a problem with you proving you're working with the right studios. And I also have a problem with is any business owners who are certified in these categories in here? How much paperwork is that? Back and forth, it's a lot. And it's just like, if my white counterpart doesn't have to worry about this at all, I still have a problem with this.
No.
I just do, flat out.
Yeah. I totally understand that.
Yeah.
The project that you ended up doing for Apple that was Black History Month related.
Yeah.
And you said you had some concerns about that. Could you talk about what?
Can we talk about that up top?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be our last one.
I just wanted to ask what companies are approaching you in a way that you like to be approached, and how are they doing that?
I just said he's my counterpart. Imagine the phone call they would have to hire Mark. Can you do that for me? It's just that simple. Man, that's a good question. Not to be pigeonholed. I think the dark place that I'm in these days, just to be fully transparent, is I now question everything that comes in the studio because of my skin color. Whether that's warranted or not, it is what it is. And that's the impact that summer had on me. How should they approach us? There's been many people who've done it, right? I don't know. It's just, and I'm not a confrontational person. I don't. Sometimes I wish I was, but I think approaching a black-owned studio shouldn't be any different, really, than approaching a white-owned studio. I think, of course, you have to walk with sensitivity and consideration, but that shouldn't hold us from a deep understanding of the dialogue and challenge that you're putting in front of us. It's really tough to put into words sometimes too. Sometimes you can just recognize the ickiness of some of these approaches, and I wish I could be more forthright, but I'm also just burned out.
We just want to thank you for being here. And we'll go up and have some drinks and